Welcome back. We are continuing our legal analysis into the Alex Murdaugh murder trials. We're just learning that day 4 has wrapped up in the courtroom in Colleton County with one of the lead investigators for the Colleton County Sheriff's Office taking the stand and being cross-examined by, of course, the defense, Dick Harpootlian and Creighton Waters, again, the prosecution's case here. We're going to send things back over to Carl B. Grant to get his assessment of what was an eventful day in the courtroom, Judy. Before we went to break, we were discussing some of the testimony that we heard from the witnesses who were the first on scene and were able to see Alex Murdaugh in those very moments.
Yeah, they focus a lot on his demeanor, and in these pretrial statements and hearings that they had, and again today, defense attorney Dick Harpootlian made a really big deal of the fact that investigators are testifying they did not see any blood on Alex Murdaugh. Let's take a listen to Corporal McDowell, who was one of the responders who arrived early on the scene, and then we'll talk a little bit more about why his testimony was so important.
We see him in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, correct?
Yes, sir.
I've looked at your report, I looked at everybody that encountered him that night. No report indicates any blood visible on him. You would agree with that?
I didn't observe any.
What?
I did not observe any.
Okay. It's a white shirt.
Yes, sir.
If you noted blood on him, you would have put that in your notes or reported that to somebody, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, obviously, that's very compelling. If you think that this man shot his family members close range, there would obviously be some sort of blood spatter. But by the same token, that also tells me that he did nothing to check on them to see if there was any hope of saving either life.
There's some logical inconsistency in this entire thing about blood spatter. Number one, you're right. If indeed you have the explosive gunshot wounds to the victims, and Dick's argument was obviously, well, there should be some blood spatter on this white T-shirt. These officers are saying, well, we didn't see it. Then on the other hand, well, if you reached over to check your son's pulse, who apparently his hands were under his body, and you checked his neck, the normal place that you check a pulse as well, when he was lying face down, you're going to expect some blood to be on the T-shirt also. So the question is, where does the truth lie? Did you really check his pulse, or was he really shot with your gun, as they're saying? So who knows where the truth lies? But the thing is, the prosecution is now, like I said, began with the building blocks to keeping its promises. All of the things that they promised that they would deliver in the opening statement, that's what they're doing right now, item by item. And of course, the defense is trying to show that these things that you did not do, that's what we're concerned about as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and very interesting that you said that, because at the beginning of Dick Harpootlian's opening statements yesterday, the defense attorney, he said what you're going to hear are just theories. And so in his line of questioning, we're seeing the defense at least trying to prove that. Judy and I were talking earlier about, letting our viewers know, journalists and us listening back at home, we're not seeing the exhibits. We're not seeing the visuals of the body camera footage. And we're not seeing those images. Those are only being shown to reporters inside the courtroom and those, of course, who are involved in the case. When it comes to the jurors looking at the visual along with the audio, how is that so much different than what we're just hearing on our side?
The kind of case that we're talking about, the emotionalism of the crime scene photographs. I had a death penalty trial once, and I think it came out later on that the jury was about to return life in prison until a photograph came out showing the dead person's child sitting on her tombstone. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a video is worth 1,000,000, you see? So these kind of pictures, they're going to be the things that are going to move the emotions of the jury. And that's why you really have to get the jury to solidify that they will only make their decision based upon the evidence and not emotions, and they'll make their decision based upon the law. And they got to have sometimes the jury got to have courage to do the right thing. They really do. And sometimes the right thing is definitely not the popular thing, but they have to keep their oath. Whatever that may be, justice has to be rendered in keeping their oath.
And follow the law. And that's such a great point that Billie brought up, because when we go back to McDowell's testimony, the officer that we just heard from on the stand, he was the person that Alex Murdaugh said, hey, how you doing too? And he testified on the stand that he didn't know him. They didn't have any sort of relationship.
Right.
So it wasn't as if it was a family member. That would be different context, right?
Right.
But going back to your point about the visuals, they also entered into evidence a still image from his body camera capturing that moment when he said, hey, how you doing? So even though we did not get to see that, the jury certainly saw
Exactly.
it. And I have to believe it conveyed something that the prosecutor wanted to send a message to the jury, again, about his demeanor in that moment.
Yes, his demeanor is very important. And that's why you tell your clients, it's not only, actually, the trial really begins, you all, the moment the jury walks in the courtroom. It doesn't begin with the opening statement. It begins the moment the jury walks in the courtroom. You and your client are already in the spotlight. They're observing your demeanor, your attitude, everything.
Well, when we talked earlier today, you talked about his attire.
His attire, yeah. Alex Murdaugh, a rich family, but you know, it was brought to my attention, you see him in khakis and a plaid shirt. You don't really see him dressed up too much. Right. Is that a strategy on the defense's side to send a message that, hey, this isn't a rich guy who is trying to get off. He's an everyday good old person
just
like
look like
you.
The common man.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, great insight as always, and moving at a pretty good pace with 7 or 8 witnesses, I believe, who testified today.
Yes.
And as Billie mentioned, court will resume 9:30 a.m. tomorrow. So we'll look forward to hearing from you again tomorrow.
This
same
trial,
place, same
yes,
time.
thank you. And this trial is off to a good start.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Carl.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back.